had a sense that this was a dancing baby because of the way that she would kick. And just, I'm like, I feel like this is a dancing baby. Like I used to say to my husband, I don't know what it is, but I feel like this kid is all about rhythm. So do other stuff that you want to do. I can't guarantee that we'll call you, but I just want you to know that you are our 11th. And if the doctor's coming in at 10, that means that you're probably not going to get seen until maybe 1-ish. Welcome back. I am so glad to have you here. If you haven't already, and I've always wanted to say this, if you haven't already, please like, subscribe, and share. Invite someone else to join in on the discussions, to join in on the Transparent Parenting podcast. Obviously, we are just at the start of our journey. And at this point, I wanted to share my story, sort of just invite you into my space and how I embarked on my parenting journey. But yeah, we have got some amazing stuff lined up for you guys over the course of our journey together. But I guess today is about me continuing my story, hopefully wrapping up my story. I thought I'd actually finish it that first time, but was just laying the foundation for it. So today is just me continuing that story. I think we've kind of done a recap, but I guess I had gotten to the point where I had told you about all the preparation that we'd done, all the research that we'd done, and had now gotten to the point where we were at the end of the last trimester of our pregnancy. I think we started to notice things which we thought were kind of synonymous or normal with pregnancy towards the tail end. So exactly a month to my due date. It's almost exactly a month. Yeah, I think it was. I woke up one night to go into, the washroom, and I noticed that the baby wasn't kicking, which was really odd because every time I would get up, any slight movement, there would be, just that kicking, and it was a very reassuring, sometimes like, whoa, kind of like kick. But it was always just reassuring for me. It was just like, oh yeah, there's a little person, on the inside, that I'm carrying on the inside. So I get up to go to the washroom as normal. And then as I'm coming back, I'm like, hang on, that's weird. I haven't felt any kicking. And I get back into the bed. And as I'm laying there, I'm thinking, okay, it's kind of been about 5 to 10 minutes since I woke up, walked to the washroom, came back. By then, usually there'll be like an acknowledging kick of, hey, are we moving? Like, like kind of like a to-do, and there wasn't that. And I kind of panicked, understandably, right? I'm like, whoa, what's going on? And I'd been hearing all these stories. I'd already had people saying, hey, be careful, in the bathroom, a friend of ours slipped and fell and lost the baby. So, you already kind of have those kind of thoughts. So I'd been extra careful, walking to the bathroom. Then you'll hear another person tell you, oh, okay, and I think these people mean well. They're not telling you these stories to make you feel or, dread, but I'd had stories about, someone's baby stopped kicking all of a sudden. So I was always mindful of, okay, has the baby kicked today? Has the baby kicked within the last hour? They tell you, obviously, as you get closer to the date, you need to be mindful of these things. And so now I go into a panic because I'm thinking, hey, it's been about 10 minutes. I haven't felt the baby kick. Not even slight movement. Sometimes it's not even a kick. It's just you can feel that movement. Remember, we're at 8 months. So the baby's quite big, so you should actually be able to feel them turning or none of that was happening. So I'm sitting there in the bed. My husband's asleep next to me, and I'm starting to kind of go into a panic. And I'm saying to him, hey, we need to go to hospital. Something's not right. The baby's not kicking. So of course he wakes up. He's panicked. I'm now almost hysterical, and I'm like, nope, deep breath. I'm going to pray. Because what else do you do? And so I start to pray, and I'm like, hey, let's just quickly pray and then go into a hospital. We lived nearby a hospital, so we're going to the hospital to get this checked, just make sure that everything is okay, and maybe the baby's just had a long day. And I had been really busy that day. And so we get up, get into a car. Thank God we had a hospital, like literally just 5 minutes around the corner from us. Went into the hospital. I was set up with, I think they call them the technician that runs the ultrasound. And he had a look, checked on the baby, heartbeat was fine, everything was okay. Mind you, I was praying the whole way to the hospital, the whole time that they were setting up to check on me, just dreading, kind of fearful, hey, but everything was fine, and so technician and the doctor said, look, maybe you just had a big day and baby also had a big day, and nobody thought anything of it. Nobody thought we need to check that. Like, why did it? Because the whole time, even in the 5 minutes, in as much as the hospital's around the corner from us, 5 minutes, it was probably 15 minutes by the time we got out of our pajamas, got something, decent, got into the car, then drove to. So it was probably about 15 minutes from that time. Then remember, from the time I woke up, didn't notice any kicking. So it's probably been half an hour. So you can imagine half an hour of no movement, no kicking. I was in a panic. And it didn't strike us as odd because by the time everything was done, baby's okay. And the doctor said, everything's okay, so you don't need to worry. We didn't even think to call into our doctor. I think I did mention it the next time I went in and saw him for an appointment. I said, hey, by the way, this happened. Is that normal? And he goes, yeah, sometimes, if you were resting and the baby was resting, maybe it was just, baby was tired. And you mentioned that you had a big day the day before. So maybe that's just it. So we didn't investigate further. It was kind of just like I remember that it was coming up quite close. So I was probably week 37, was supposed to be my last appointment before the due date. And so then week 37 comes along, I go in, I have an appointment, and I get another 3D scan, and it was beautiful. I could see all the features, we already were having discussions around whose eyes we felt she had, and that nose looks like, such and such. And we could see the hair outline. It was amazing. I mean, these 3D, like, technology is a whole other thing, so it was just amazing. And in fact, I think that during that visit, I think I went in, I'm not sure if I went in with my husband, but we actually witnessed the child yawn. Like, we saw the baby kind of make some movements with her face. And then the doctor mentioned to us, hey, kids actually cry in the womb. We didn't know. And he says he didn't know either until he started doing the 3D scans. And you could actually see a child cry, just like they would, just like an infant would cry. Sometimes it could just be, I don't know why they would cry in the womb, but they do. And we saw her kind of stretch one time and kind of like yawn. It looked like a yawn to us. And then there was a little bit of a kind of what we thought was a smile. So it was just so exciting. We were engaging with a baby in this way. We knew her before we knew her, if that makes sense, because we could see all these little kind of, mannerisms that we could link back to either one of us, my husband or I. So it was super exciting. So we did that 37-week scan, got the scans, went home with them. And then now we're just waiting for the baby. I had not wanted to have, what do you call them? A baby shower. We kind of were just going to do our thing, have the baby. But, one of my friends decided to throw a surprise baby shower. And that was really great. It was just a very small, tight-knit family affair. And it was a surprise. So it was really, really good. And again, just created that hype and excitement for the baby's coming. It was 3 days before, maybe actually probably, so let me say a week before my due date. I had a phone call with some of my really good friends in Australia. Looking back on this now, it's not as hard. But I think immediately after looking back, it was really difficult for me because we went on a group call. They couldn't be there for the birth of the baby. These were my really good friends. Remember that I had lived away for almost 22 years. So these are people that I had done life with, but I just happened to be living back in Kenya now. And so they couldn't be part of the birth, but they wanted me to be part of, like, hey, what kind of prep have you done and all of that. So I had set up a little nursery in my second bedroom. My husband and I were living in a 2-bedroom apartment. So we'd set up kind of like a nursery situation where, I would do the baby bathe the baby, do the changing, all of that. I had a nursing, like little armchair in a corner. It was glorious. I had a chest full of her clothes. I'd done it all. I'm one of those, I like to be organized. So I'd already, I'd labeled everything. I'd started to label everything so that, in case I ended up in hospital for too long and I needed to send my husband for more supplies. So he knew where the baby's onesies are, where they're called rompers were, and all of that. Like I kind of labeled everything. So I was like super organized, super excited. And so we had this group call. My gosh, it must have gone for like 4 hours where we were just, some of them were mums. Some of my friends in the group, I think it was just 4 friends, but 2 of them were already mums. So, just them giving me that approving nod of, oh my gosh, the nursery is cute. They're kind of going through everything. I took them through everything. Like, I guess girls can be that way. We kind of went drawer by drawer. I'm like, oh, these are her cute little socks. These are her cute little hats. It was, yeah, so it was just a whole time that we had together. It was fun. It was exciting. I was going to have the baby the following week. So this was probably like a Wednesday. I think I'm due like on a Tuesday or something. Was it a Friday? I can't even remember now. But I was due the following, I think I was due on a Friday, and I'm having this phone call with my girlfriends on the Wednesday or Thursday, let's see. So that's really exciting. And then on the Saturday, we had one of those, the stock standard. We're like, you know what? Let's do a bump shoot. My husband and I were like, how are we going to commemorate this whole journey that we've been on? So we went in and we had a bump shoot, and it was really great because my cousin, who is an amazing MUA, she does amazing artwork, did some artwork on my bump. And so it was a whole Saturday of shooting. And I remember the baby was kicking so vigorously. I was like, again, my dancing baby obviously gets that this is, we're almost there. This is amazing. And I remember the whole day we just had lots of active kicks. My appetite was kawaida, just like I was eating normally. Everything was great. And then we go into Sunday, Monday. And Monday I notice there's movement, not so much kicking. And the movement is sporadic and really kind of far apart. Yeah. So I'm kind of like, okay. And I do a bit of research, Dr. Google. And of course, Google will tell you sometimes when babies grow bigger, it is a little bit difficult for them in the womb now because there's not as much space. So their movements can be a little bit kind of, they don't have much room to move in. So it's a confined space. That's what the word I was looking for is. It's really confined, right? So I kind of had peace with myself where I was like, okay, I'm kind of having some sense or some kind of movement, so it's all good. But now come Tuesday, I'm not so confident because the movements don't feel natural. And I'm not panicked because remember, we kind of had a situation where the baby, hadn't kicked before and it was all okay. So I remember saying to my husband, hey, I think at some point we need to make some time and go into the doctor because the baby's not moving in a natural way, not the way that she's been moving the last few weeks or days. And he's like, okay, yeah, we should do it. So it's probably now, is it Tuesday night going on to Wednesday? Yeah, it was probably Tuesday night going into Wednesday where I'd spent the whole day and then I'm not feeling, something's not right. Just something was off for me. And so again, it's probably 2, 3 in the morning. I'm laying in the bed. I turn to my husband and I'm like, we need to go to the hospital now. Something is not right. Like the baby hasn't kicked. There's just been these weird movements and the movements don't feel natural. And so he says, that's cool. Kudos to my husband. Like he was so supportive the entire journey. Not like, hey, we'll go in the morning type situation. Nope, you want to go now? Let's go. Let's do it. So it was probably 4 in the morning, if I recall correctly. And we jumped in the car, hospital around the corner from us, 5 minutes, went there. And in my heart, I'm praying. I'm telling my husband, hey, you need to pray. And I'm telling myself, hey, it's going to be exactly what it was the last time. We're going to get told the baby's just really tired, the baby's really big. So, of course, that's why you're not getting as much movement, blah, blah, blah. So we get there and it's the same technician. So I'm like, oh, I'm already feeling comfortable. I'm like, hey, you remember us? We were here a month ago. And he's like, oh, yeah, I remember you guys. And so he sets me up, he gets the gel out and he starts to do an ultrasound. And he does it and he's really quiet. He's really quiet. He's not sort of bantering away like he did the previous time. And I don't remember the exact wordings, but it was something along the lines of, Bella, I know last time you were here, everything was okay and baby was moving around. But unfortunately, this time is not the case. Baby's not moving because her heart stopped. And like at that point, the room is spinning, like spinning because like, okay, it's 4 a.m. I'm probably having a nightmare. Maybe I have dreamt this whole thing because it's happened before. So somebody wake me up. And I said, what? What? And he said, I'm so sorry to inform you. And my husband was standing outside because the room was so tiny he couldn't be in there. So I just start shouting for him. I start calling his name. I'm like, hey, I don't even remember everything in that moment. I just remember trying to quickly get dressed. And the first place I ran to, because at that stage of your pregnancy, I mean, I'm due in 2 days. I'm actually due in about 3 days. Yeah. So that was a Wednesday. I was due on a Friday. So this is Wednesday a.m., like we a.m. So there's going to be Wednesday, Thursday, and then I'm due on the Friday. Would be my 40 weeks on the dot. And I'm of course, like my bladder is full, as is the case when you're that pregnant. So first place I run to is the restroom. I run past my husband and I'm like, talk to the technician. So the technician is now breaking down the news to my husband. And I run past him. I'm screaming. I'm hugging. I don't know what to do. I'm bent over, running to the washroom. I get into the washroom and I start to scream and heave. I'm screaming and heaving. All the nursing staff, from what I recall, there was doctors that came into the washroom because it's 4 a.m. They were not busy. I think we and another couple were the only patients there that day. And so they all came because they could hear the screaming. I mean, it's echoing in a bathroom, and I can't believe what's happened. I stop, I breathe, and then it hits me. Like it just kept coming in waves and quick successions. And so I'm like screaming and heaving and crying, and it feels like I'm throwing up, but I'm not throwing up. It's hard to kind of explain what was going on in that moment, but it was just complete and utter shock. I was in such utter shock that I sobered up with the thought that, look, this is just a local neighborhood hospital. I think they've got it wrong. I come out into the corridor and my husband is heaving himself in shock. And he's trying to make a phone call to both sets of parents. So my parents, his parents, to say, this is what's happened. This is what's happened. This is the news that we've just received. And I could see him struggling. And now I'm seeing him heaving. And I'm like, oh my gosh, no. So I come back and I tell him, no, don't worry. We're going to go to like a major hospital because they will tell us the truth. Maybe the equipment here is wrong. Like I'm trying to tell myself all this narrative of like they could have got it wrong and maybe their equipment's not working right. So maybe if we go to this major hospital, they'll tell us something completely different. Like, oh, you know what? It just looked like that, but it's not the case. I was hoping for that. And so we quickly jump in the car, but we both just have this downcast, like we know what it is, but we're clinging to anything. We're clutching at straws at this time. So we enter the car. I remember we said nothing to each other. I called my brother who lived like in a building next to ours. It wasn't too far from me. And I called him. It was a robotic conversation. I said to him, hi, can you take us? Because we couldn't drive. I mean, even driving back, despite it being just 5 minutes away from our place, driving back, I think my husband must have driven at like 5 Ks per hour. Like it was, we crawled home because we were just in this daze. And we get home. I already had my baby bag set up and ready to go to hospital. So I don't know why, but I grabbed that bag and I held on. I was clinging onto it for dear life. I grabbed a framed photo of her last scan, the week 37 scan, and I took that with me. And my brother, but then when I had the conversation with him, I said, "Hey, are you okay to take us to hospital?" I didn't even explain anything. I just said, "Hey, are you okay to take us to hospital?" And he said, "Yes, I've spoken to dad." It wasn't until much later, and I mean much, much later, probably 2 weeks after, I found out that my brother didn't know what had happened. My father, in shock, had called my brother and said, "You need to go to your sister's place now." So that was the entirety of their conversation. And so my brother is thinking, "Oh my gosh, my sister must be having a baby. Like, this is it. This is the time." In fact, he was so excited and confused. He tells me he walked out in his vest and barefoot because he's like, "I need to get to my sister's house now." And then kind of took a few steps and realized, "Oh, I need to go back in, put on some clothes and some shoes, you know." So then around that time, I call him and say, "Hey, are you like, no one's talking about what's just happened or what news we've just discovered. We're kind of just, "Hey, are you able to take me to hospital?" He says, "Yes, I've just spoken to dad. I'm on my way." So within a few minutes, he was at our place. And so I'm busy grabbing all this and I'm crying. Tears are streaming down. My brother, bless his heart, my last born brother, has never, I mean, apart from the movies, obviously, really ever been around a woman in labor. So in his mind, I'm in labor. I'm about to have the baby. There's no rush. I wasn't moving in the the hurry that we see women in the movies, grabbing their bag and grabbing everything on their way out. I wasn't doing any of that. I just had tears streaming down my eyes and I'm busy grabbing all my whatever I feel I need to use in hospital. And my husband is not talking. He's just solemn and somber as well. And so my brother is looking at us like, okay, she must be really in so much pain if she's just, kind of. And so we get in the car and we drive slowly to this major hospital. And I'm thinking my brother knows what's going on, but he's just respecting. So there's just silence. We get to hospital. Long story short, I get checked and they confirm what we had dreaded. That the baby's no more. Her heartbeat is not, we can't hear her heartbeat. There's no movement. The funny thing is, on the way to hospital, both hospitals, there was still movement, which I now know is my baby was actually just, floating around in my womb, which is, a lot of this stuff is in hindsight. And it was heartbreaking and devastating beyond words, like beyond words. And all I wanted to do was scream, but I was surrounded by so many people and I was in all these closed quarters. I was in the hospital and, they wanted to keep me there and all these different things were happening. And I just wanted a space. I wanted an open field where I could scream because I was not computing. I understood, but I didn't, And so at this point, the hospital insists that we need to do an induction immediately because there's no point hanging on. There's no point holding on and waiting for labor to start naturally. I mean, obviously, your body will start to expel. But they were like, "Hey, the sooner we can get an induction going." And I begged them. I said, "Please don't put me through the torture of unnatural birth because there's no joy at the end of that. Like, why would I have gone through all that and there's no joy at the end of that?" I was excited to have a natural birth when there was a baby at the end of that. I said, "Is it possible for someone to just put me under something? Like, I just want to go under, you go in, get the baby out, and I'll hold on to her and I will say goodbye, but please don't put me through labor if I'm not going to have joy at the end of it." And, we got in contact with our doctor and let him know what had happened. And I think my husband's the one that called him and he said that he would be in the hospital later on in the day because by this point it's probably 9 a.m. and my family have already arrived. I think my husband's family have arrived. So, and it's during COVID, so we can't have too many people either. So they're only allowed to come in one by one to see me. There was all that happening as well. But yeah, so I'm begging them, and I even begged my doctor. I said, "Are you able to do a C-section?" And he said, technically, C-section is a major surgery, and we don't want to have to put you through a major surgery. That the best thing for you is for you to just have a natural birth. We're going to induce you. And so at this point, he steps back. In a way that was very strange to me. When he arrived at the hospital, because I was already in my room, and we're having all these deliberations and discussions, and I'm begging and I'm saying, hey, I want my doctor, I want my doctor. And he finally comes in because he had a scheduled birth for someone else in the hospital that day. So I guess it was convenient for him to be there at that time. But he comes in. The first thing he asked me for was, do you have your medical card? So remember, I told you that there's no real personal relationship or knowing of the patient because there's all that many other women that he was attending to. So the only way he knew what my history was or what was going on with me was that medical card. And so I happened to have it on me and I gave it to him. He looked at it. Now, in hindsight, my husband and I talk about it. It was him making sure that he had covered all his bases, that he'd done all the tests that he needed to do, which is painful to think about because it was such a transactional, mechanical, it's happened. And that was actually the last time I ever saw him. Not by choice. It's just the relationship for him had ended. His work was done. Didn't come back to check on me, nothing. He distanced himself from what had happened. And that was painful because then I realized, again, it was just a transaction. And I guess doctors have people passing all the time and all of that. But again, there tends to be a bedside manner. There tends to be a Paula to the family. There tends to be an explainer around, hey, this was potentially what could have happened. There was none of that. He came into my room. He asked for the card. He looked at it. And then he said, sorry, you can't have a C-section. Again, remember, he was a very kind man. So it was in a very polite manner said, no, you can't have a C-section. It's not the right decision for you. The best thing is for you to let the hospital staff take over. And I said, okay, will you be there? And he said, no, technically the hospital will now take over because, we're not birthing a baby, a live baby. And that was it. He disappeared. Like there was never any follow-up or, so I'm now in the hospital. I don't want to be there anymore. So I asked them when they will schedule my induction. There was a situation with our insurance and I think it kicked in on the day that she was due. Like, there's some insurances that you need to wait a full 12 months before it matures for you to be able to have the baby. So I think, interestingly, our insurance was maturing for us to be able to claim on the day that she was due, which was the Friday. So remember, this is kind of like Wednesday in the morning. And so I said to them, okay, fine. If you need to induce me, you need to take the baby out. That's cool. We are opting to have that induction and all of that done on the Friday. So my husband and I jumped in the car. I don't even remember who drove us. And I said, I don't want to go back home. Because if I went home, I was going to be confronted by the nursery. I was going to be confronted by her bed. I was going to be confronted by everything of hers. And I just didn't want to in that moment. And so I went to my favorite park. I said, can we please go to this particular forest park that I love to walk at? They have like a pond. It's beautiful. I said, that's where I want to go. So everyone, all of our close friends and family members all drove to that and just allowed me to walk. And I remember just crying and letting it out. And just, I wanted to scream, but then again, I was covered by so many people. So I couldn't kind of really scream and let it all out. But fast forward, and I wanted to talk about maternal health in this country, but I don't think it's limited to maternal health. I think it's just health in general and the way we do it in our country. There's some really amazing doctors here, but there's also some that I can't believe sometimes the level of transaction in the way that they deal with their patients. And so we went back in on Friday. I needed to do a COVID test to be readmitted into the hospital, which was just the last thing you want is someone shoving something up your nose. But I was like, they need to do it for me to be able to go into surgery. So I did it. And they were going to induce me at 6 a.m. Yeah, so probably labor was going to happen later on in the day. So I think we arrived at hospital like just after 3 a.m. maybe. And the doctor on duty in the maternity ward that day was going to be the doctor that was going to help me through this. Um, if depending on when labor happened, so they do it in shifts. So the first one that came in was great. He was a male doctor, young guy, really amazing bedside manner. Mind you, this particular hospital, and I wish I could mention the name, but I'm not going to because I had two mixed experiences. But by and large, I actually had an amazing experience. Everyone from the janitorial staff, the nurses, like just everyone who heard or knew what had happened. And I had a private room, so everyone kind of everyone, like even the ladies who were serving me my food throughout the day, anyone who knew the story was so kind to me. And my husband was so amazing. They would say, Paule, they were like, hey, don't worry. If you need anything, we're here for you. And so even that first doctor that came in, checked, how far along I was in terms of my cervix and said, look, we're going to have to give you something to soften the cervix and get that whole process going, was amazing. So they do what they needed to do. And as the day is going along, the shifts are changing. And so by the time my body is kind of going into labor or supposedly going into labor, or my cervix was kind of dilated enough for them to start, pumping. I don't know what it is that is it oxytocin? I don't know what it is that they pump to start really inducing you. I think that was kind of happening towards the end of the day. And so there was a completely different doctor that took on that shift. And she came on. It started off well enough. I have amazing respect for doctors because they know. I don't. I haven't studied. And the relationship started off well enough. She knew what was going on. And so she was very apologetic. She said, look, I'm really sorry about what's happened. This is what needs to happen now. Your cervix is this far dilated. This is what we're going to do. So she explained it. I don't remember most of it because it was all, I was just in a daze. And they said, look, we're going to, give you an epidural. We're going to give you whatever drugs it is to make this as not as devastating, not as horrific as it it can be, especially when you know that you're not getting a baby or a live baby at the end of this. And so then it starts, and I kind of start to go into labor. And I've spoken to ladies that have been induced, and I've spoken to ladies that have gone into labor naturally. And let me tell you, being induced is not a joke because your body is technically not ready. You are jump starting it to go into labor. You're forcing it into labor. And I've never felt so much pain in my life, ever. And this is with drugs and everything else. I'm not even going to go into all that, but it was horrible. So there's just this mental and emotional battle. And then there's just this whole physical thing going on with me. My husband's eyes are just wide open. He's bewildered because we're not getting a baby at the end of this, but we're having to go through this whole process. This doctor comes in, and I guess maybe, I don't know if it was supposed to be like a quick in and out type situation. They wanted to keep doing cervical sweeps, and I wasn't into it. I felt like there was just so much pain. And I remember her at different points saying, it's not that painful. I have 3 kids of my own. Yeah, so there's that element of shaming and insensitivity. And then she at some point turned around and said, look, the reason why because now I was having difficulty with labor and the baby coming through. And this wasn't just the drugs, because I remember my husband actually, is able to then confirm and corroborate, like this is actually what she said. So yes, she did at one point say to me, you're holding on to this baby, which is why she's not coming out. Yeah, you need to let go of this baby. And I don't mean in a kind of like a very soft, like, oh, you're holding on to this baby and that's why it was kind of very matter of fact. Hey, you need to let go of this baby. Yeah, she's gone. You need to so it became very, and maybe there's that element to the medical field where it's like we can't get caught up in our emotions right now, but it was not what I needed right then, because going into labor is there's a psychological element to it. There's a mental, and so that was not helping. It was just causing me to clam up even further. At some point, she realized she wasn't getting anywhere with me, because now by this point, the relationship is it's just there's a lot of friction. I mean, so much pain. She decides to send in her resident, and her resident, monkey see, monkey do. I think I mentioned it with the very first doctor that we went to, where we learn from what we see. She acted exactly the same way. In fact, she was, I would say, even more militant and colder. And she's trying to do a cervical sweep. I'm like, I don't want to do a cervical sweep. A patient should be able to advocate for themselves. Like, it should be my right to turn around and say, I don't want to have a cervical sweep because I'm in so much pain. But there you go, they had to do it. And I didn't know that I could say no and it'd be my right to say no. But it was kind of made to seem that if I didn't get it done, then I was jeopardizing myself, my health. And so, my husband's trying to encourage me, like, hey, just go along with it. Because he doesn't know what's going on. Like, none of us know what's going on. It was, I could go into every detail, but let me just tell you, it was one of the most horrific experiences I've ever gone through. It didn't need to be. Anytime the doctors went out of the room, I remember the nurse in charge, and I feel like she didn't feel like she had a voice in the room, would come in and say, hey, there's a few of us that are praying for you. You're not alone. We're in this together. You can do this. And every time she would come in, I don't know who you are and I don't know if you remember me and you're watching this. My gosh, the difference it made. I would feel my whole body just relax. I would feel so covered in love and warmth. I didn't know this woman, but just that reassurance. And it wasn't just me she was talking to, she was talking to my husband as well. And she would say, I'm so sorry that you guys have had to go through this. You're okay. We're here. There's a bunch of us that are just rooting for you. Like you guys are gonna be okay. You're gonna see the other side of this. This night's gonna be over because mind you, by this time it's gone way past midnight. So remember, I started this whole journey at like 6 a.m, where they were giving me cervix softeners, and then it just went on and on. And so now I'm on the next shift with this doctor. I think her shift started at like 6 p.m. and we're now well into the throes of like midnight. Horrific experience, but I finally go well and truly go into labor, and there's this surge and the baby comes through at about 7, I think it was 7:33 a.m. I remember because it was recorded. And the worst thing, when you have, I can't even remember what they call it, but essentially what you see on the sheet of paper is that it's a stillbirth, and they have a term for it. I can't remember. It was like infant IUD or something. I can't remember, like infant something death. I can't remember. But just seeing those words, it's like a nightmare. Like the last thing you ever want to see as a parent is that. And I remember seeing that. I don't remember much more detail throughout the day because I was in and out with the drugs. But I do remember my husband had let our doula know, because we had a doula, if you remember, someone that was supposed to assist us with the birthing journey. And I remember she sent me a text message and she said, Bella, I'm so sorry for what you've just gone through. And I know it's a very difficult time, and I hope you actually get to read this message before it's too late. But she said, Bella, ensure that you get a keepsake, whether it be a handprint of your baby, whether it be a footprint of your baby, just something that you can commemorate her life with. And I remember thinking, oh, wow, I need to let my husband know. So I did. And I think some of our siblings were already in the hospital at that time. So we asked them to get us some paint, to get us some manila. The baby was there with me, and I was holding on to her, just clinging for dear life, because I wanted to shake her awake. I wanted to speak life to her. At this point, there's discussions going on about doing a postmortem to find out what happened with the baby. I was looking at her and I'm like, she's perfect. She had perfect eyes, perfect little fingers, perfect little hands, just perfect in every way. In fact, it looked like she was sleeping. And I'm thinking, can't somebody just bring her back to life? Horrific, just horrible experience, tears streaming down my eyes. And we hold on, we waited, and my brother, I think, and my sister-in-law managed to get the paint and the manila paper. And by this point, I'm just sort of stoic. I've gone into robot mode. I think it was the after effects of the drugs. I literally was operating like a robot. I remember getting the paint, putting it on my baby's hands, putting it on her feet, and then just, like mechanically doing these handprints. And what's running through my mind is these are activities, these are fun things that I wanted to do when she was much older. Like when she was 2, we would do crafts activities and all of that. And I'm thinking I'll never get to do that with her. Just despair. But I'm in a daze. My husband's in a daze. And so we did all that. And then comes the time where they had to take the baby away. Like they now had to go put her in a cold room. And the days after that were just so dark. Again, everyone at the hospital was amazing. We did find out what the cause of death was, and we found that out sort of a little bit after. The doctor on duty that night, that had been amazing at the start. Well, let me not say amazing at the start. Had been great at the start, and then just that quickly deteriorated. But every statement she was saying, right up to the end, even when she found out what she suspected or what she thought had happened with the baby, I remember in that haze of being under the drugs, I think I was on tramadol and something else, I remember her saying to my husband, this is typical with older women. I was so drugged out, but I wanted to say, you, like enough. Like I've had enough of your negativity and your just lack of a heart. And I couldn't. I was so drugged out. And my husband was just so robotic. He's just, okay, because what do you do in that moment? I mean, in hindsight, we have choice words for her. At some point, I toyed with the idea of writing her a letter and just letting her know how I feel. But I think for me, I've forgiven her. But it is unfortunate because there could be other couples, other mothers that are going through the same thing or have gone through the same thing and been in her care. That's just not the way you treat someone that's going through the worst time of their lives. So that is how that was my parenting journey. That was the beginning of it. It was, and then it wasn't. But it ends well because after about a year of just grieving, and it was dark days. It was extremely, extremely dark days. And I want to pause here and say it is so important to have your mental health in check because you can go down a rabbit hole that you can never get yourself out of. I went in for counseling, not immediately, and I wish I had, but it was all sorts of different things. And I think my husband had his own grieving style. I had my own grieving style. And so we went off into our corners. That also put a strain on our marriage because I wasn't able to, I'm very expressive. I want to talk about it all the time. I wanted to keep everything exactly where it was. I wanted to look at the crib every day. We had a blowout picture of her last scan, and I wanted that on display. I wanted to be in touch with everything. I did not let go of that bag. The bag, the baby bag that was supposed to be my hospital bag, that was supposed to have everything once the baby came. I didn't want to let go of that. Whereas his grieving style was, I need to get rid of everything. I can't be around everything because every day it's a reminder. And so just that difference in grieving styles was really, really difficult for us. One of the other things I remember in hospital when I got that text from my doula, she said is make sure you have a funeral for your baby, if possible. And I was shocked to discover much later that there are communities, there are people that, once you have your stillbirth, they don't even take the baby home with them. They leave it to the hospital and there's no judgment on them. It's just sometimes I think it's a cultural thing. I was trying to understand from my doula, what do you mean like they don't have a funeral? That was a whole human being. We grew with her as we watched the scans. What do you mean there's people that don't have funerals? And why would you even suggest that I insist on having a funeral? Isn't that automatic? And she said, no, there are some cultures that say, hey, you need to walk away from this because it's considered taboo. It's bad luck. Something happened to that child. You need to just leave that memory in hospital, let the hospital incinerate or do whatever it is that they need to do to get rid of that baby. That came as a shock to me. And maybe it's something we can cover down the track in the way of discussion, because I feel for those mothers, and I have spoken to some of them who were not allowed to have a ceremony to say goodbye to their baby. But I was privileged. I'm so grateful for both sets of our families that allowed us to have that. Like not that it was on them, but I mean, it was the most natural thing. A member of the family has passed. We're going to say goodbye. And so we did. We had a beautiful send off. I didn't want anything black. So we had a very cute little white casket. We all wore white. I said it was all white or pink. So we all wore shades of white. It was just a happy celebration of the life that had been in me, even if she never lived on this side of eternity. For me, she had been as alive as any baby because we had watched her grow through those 3D scans. And if there's one thing I am super grateful for is that doctor that had that particular piece of technology within his clinic, that I was able to interact with my daughter, to see her smile. In fact, one time we even caught her crying, as he had indicated that, sometimes you'll see the baby crying in the womb. So to us, she was very much alive. She had become a very much member of the family. We had already named her. So we would even refer to like, oh, Casey's done this today, or Casey kicked this many times today, or, oh my goodness, I need to get Casey this. So, so we did have a beautiful send-off. And like I said, it doesn't end there. It does end really well for us. We went into that despair and that really dark place of grieving. It was difficult for our marriage, but thank God for counseling. Thank God for praying family members. And, even us just having to go into our own individual closet with God and go, what was that? Why? Difficult questions that we don't have answers to this day. But we do have an amazing child. And that happened, almost 2 years later. It was a year and a half later. I don't even know what the timelines are. 3 months after we lost our baby, Casey, we found out that we were pregnant. And we were super, super excited. What I'm about to say next might be controversial, but it was around the time that we were being mandated to have COVID vaccines. And you couldn't travel out of the country. You couldn't do anything if you hadn't had a vaccine, if you didn't have that whole thing to say that you'd been through all the shots and the boosters and whatnot. And up until that point, I had resisted. I didn't need to travel. I didn't need to do anything. So I didn't, but I had to get a shot and I can't remember why. And so I remember driving. I didn't know I was expectant at the time. I remember driving to one of the major hospitals. I sat down. It was a very quick and fairly easy process. There was a lot of apprehension, but I assumed that my apprehension was around me just not agreeing with the whole vaccine situation. And so I got the vaccine. 2 days. I think it was 2 days later, I started spotting. And I realized I was bleeding. And I'm like, what is going on? Not because I don't know that I'm expecting. So I'm not even linking it back to the vaccine. I'm just like, what is going on with me? And so I go into, actually the first thing that occurred to me to do was just to get a pregnancy check, because some women, in their first few days, which hadn't happened with me previously, they do spot, and it's normal. But, it's important to go in and see your OBS-GYN. So I did a pregnancy test and found out that I was pregnant, but it was kind of like really faint. Usually those lines are really bold. And so that, I think, indicated there was something wrong with the HCG count. Is it HCG? I think it's called HCG, which is the indicators of the hormones, the pregnancy hormones. And so long story short, I go in, I see a doctor, and he's like, look, it's not good news. You are probably, because he's like, how many days have you been spotting? By this point, by the time I went to see him, I think it had been 2 days. He goes, it is possible that you are miscarrying. You can imagine this is 3 months after the fact. My head just starts spinning again. And I'm like, what is going on? By this time, there'd been a lot of discussion around nobody really knowing what the effect of the vaccines were on different people groups, including expectant mothers. And so, like I said, it's controversial. Some people might not agree with me from the medical community, but I believe that vaccine actually triggered the miscarriage. And I'll leave that there. I'm not going to take it any further. I don't want to be known as one of those non-vaxxers. But I really do believe that it was linked back. So that was a whole other grieving situation that he and I had to go through. And so that's why there was so much strain for us as a married couple and how we were dealing with it. But I thank God for counseling, because we were able to come out of that. And then, so about a year and a half after this whole period, we were blessed to be expectant again. And this time, my goodness, you can imagine I was walking on eggshells. Every little thing that I noticed, I can't even remember how many times I jumped and would go to hospital. Thank God we lived around the corner from a hospital. Again, I would go. Sometimes I wouldn't even tell my husband because I think it was excessive. But you can imagine the trauma of what we'd just gone through. I wanted to be sure. I wanted to be careful. And so we do. We have an amazing, amazing, amazing child who we thank God for every day. She is just the light of our home, the light of our hearts. And we thank God for her. It wouldn't be possible without him. She is just, we look at her and we think about the times that we were crying and God knew that she was coming. And so we're so grateful. But that's it. That's sort of my story with how I embarked, or how my husband and I embarked on our parenting journey, where we're at now with this boisterous, energetic, full of life toddler, trying to figure out, how do we navigate the future? How do we set her up to succeed? How can we give her the best that we know how to, because these kids do not come with a manual. And so a lot of questions started coming up between the two of us, like, hey, how do we do this? And I started asking. I didn't have a mom group, per se, because by the time I moved back to Kenya, a lot of my friends that I'd gone to high school with either already had kids, had moved on, so we didn't have connection anymore. I did have my group of friends overseas, but then, of course, distance becomes an issue. And so when I had my baby, I didn't really have anyone to look to. The people that I knew had had their kids 40 years before, or those that had just had their kids before. Maybe we didn't have as close a relationship, so I didn't feel at liberty to ask the deeper questions. And as our child grew, I started asking more and more questions, and I'd find that a lot of other parents were kind of scratching their heads about the same thing, or we would just have our little corner discussions. And then I kind of had the idea that, hey, why don't we just open up a forum, this space, this Transparent Parenting podcast, to just start having this discussion and doing the parenting journey together, regardless of what stage you're at. I want to talk to older moms who have navigated teenagehood, who've navigated teaching their kids about money, navigated teaching their kids about strangers, about being secure, being safe, navigated their kids through different education systems. How do we set our kids up to succeed for the future? I mean, ultimately, these kids belong to God. I'm a believer, and I'm like, at the end of the day, these kids belong to God. He's just loaning them to us. But you also want to do the best that you can with his help. But I believe that we can do that together. And so that's my story. I'm Bella. I'm going to be your host along the journey of this podcast. But I invite you to have meaningful conversations with us. I invite you to have transparent conversations with us. I invite you to laugh with us, to cry with us. I'm surprised that I got through all this without crying, by the way. But I'm inviting you into this space of vulnerability, and I'm inviting you to be vulnerable with us. So I look forward to many, 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 many more episodes. And let's grow together. Thank you. Goodbye. How many minutes was that? It felt
53 minutes.
Okay, so not too bad. We're still within range.